Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transforming their business, and I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.
Hello. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode with the one and only Lisa Robyn Wood. So Lisa is a middle manager, coach and trainer, and has also run other businesses. I've known Lisa for a number of years. We're really good friends. She was part of my networking group, and just to warn you, she's a big character with strong, clear views on how to support people in business. There you go, Lisa. How about that for an intro?
Oh, thanks, Raj. I think it's so accurate as well. Big character. Yeah, I've definitely had that before. Possibly not in a complimentary sense, but we'll probably come back to that at some stage as we talk about my background and why I do what I do now.
Absolutely. But this was obviously meant in a complimentary way, and we're very pleased to have you on board. So, Lisa, welcome. Please do tell us about your career journey to date.
Yeah, so I started my career in the utilities sector. So I was one of those typical graduates who kind of fell out of university having had a blast and then sort of scrambled around going, oh God, what am I actually going to do with this degree I've earned? And found myself working for British Gas, who I ended up staying with for a number of years. I absolutely loved the environment that they provided. Very much a sort of fast-moving, quite vibrant, quite probably typical corporate space, but I particularly liked that about it. And I still do love the corporate space. But I very much now tend to support small businesses and entrepreneurs with a bit of corporate on the side. But I came through into coaching sort of later in my career, and it was to do with the fact that I myself was starting to suffer with some feelings of self-doubt and a real lack of confidence. Now, I know that probably comes across as quite surprising to you now, especially as you know me as I am today, Romesh. I am a very confident person, but I think from a professional sense, that isn't always consistent for me. And I definitely had a crisis of confidence. This was probably 2014 when I was in a senior middle management role at British Gas. And at the time, it was a very isolating, quite scary experience. I had organically grown, I would say, into my leadership at that stage and was now leading a team of leaders and feeling very much out of my depth and not really knowing how I could support them in the most authentic and effective way. And this situation sort of continued for a number of months. And just, as I said, like my self-belief really started to erode. And I think now we would refer to that as an element of imposter phenomenon, which is the language we tend to use. But at the time, that wasn't available. So really at the time, I just thought I was rubbish, to be quite honest, and had thoughts of exiting the company, going off to find something else. But the challenge I had was I didn't really know what else I could do. And because my confidence was so low, I wasn't going to really back myself in those environments. I wasn't going to back myself in an interview because I didn't believe I could do anything else. So I came across coaching at that stage, and it was an intervention that I personally invested in. I went and sought it outside of the organisation. And it's such a cliched word. It gets used loads in coaching and by coaches, and I absolutely hate it, but I haven't got anything else to use. It was transformational. And one of the realizations I had was this is the language of leadership. This is what truly empowering people means and is about. This is how you actually do that. And so I decided that I wanted to invest in my personal development and qualified to be a professional coach and add it to my leadership toolkit.
And that was whilst you were still in
so that was while I was still in that corporate environment, and that actually enabled me to reconnect with my confidence and my capabilities, and it actually is what enabled me to continue to thrive in British Gas and in the energy sector. From then on in, I absolutely loved my leadership roles, and roles plural, because I went on to like challenge myself outside of the sector and went to work for Lucas A. Ribena for a couple of years. But
you're telling
ultimately,
you're telling a very personal story there. No, it's fine. You're telling a very personal story there, Lisa, but this is common, right? The one thing that's interesting from what you're saying, although you're talking about your own personal experience and background, this is the number of people who find themselves in those middle management positions, promotion and up, and then suddenly find themselves in such an uncomfortable situation is quite common. And we interestingly get lots of entrepreneurs who say to us, we can't find the people to run our businesses for us. And therefore you're getting this conflict.
Yeah, I think it's this for me at the time, but I think it's still true now. There's this view of the higher up you go in an organization, regardless of the size, or even when you decide to step away and do what the three of us have done and decide to become entrepreneurs and launch our own businesses. I think there's this perception, now maybe it's an internal one that we all carry with us, but I do think it's informed by our environments and who we interact with. But there's this perception that we know what we're doing and we've just got it all sorted all the time. And I definitely felt that pressure often in a middle management position, because there was pressure from below in terms of the teams and the people I was responsible for, the departments I was responsible for. And there was the same pressure from above in the execs. And it's a very intense space to be in when you're being relied upon by so many different people for so many different things. Your senior managers want strategic and commercial expertise, and they want vision from you and innovation. Your team just want you to support them resolve the day-to-day issues and ensure the clients are happy and actually help them with their personal problems and make sure that work's really great for them. So it's very different roles that you're playing for very a wide group of people at any given time. And that is such a juggle. And that doesn't even take into account what you yourself are going through. Because I think that's the other part for me that I get quite passionate about is at the end of the day, yes, you are a leader of people. You've got quite big responsibilities, but that doesn't mean that you yourself don't have needs and that you yourself don't need support and that there isn't an element of ensuring at all times that you're included in the priorities. I think that's when you can become quite lost. And I've definitely experienced that when I was still very much in employment and in those corporate spaces. And it's still what I see with clients that I work with today, whether it's those in middle management roles in corporates or, senior leaders in SMEs who sit reporting into founders or even founders. It's still this element of what about me? And I think some of us just really struggle with that notion of prioritizing ourselves and it being okay, because it absolutely is. We are allowed to care for ourselves and we're allowed to enjoy what we do. And that's fundamentally what I talk about, because my tag. Sorry.
Do you think big organisations are missing the productivity opportunity by supporting the middle managers? And because there is a lot of support for new entrants, there is a lot of support, as you've talked to me previously about, as execs. But what about middle managers are often the heart of the organisation, really. And do you think that's a missed opportunity for some of these corporates and the SMEs who are growing people into middle management roles and assuming they can just take on that magic extra responsibility without the kind of support required?
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. I think there's too much. I hear it too often, and I think it's really lazy, actually. I think there's too much finger pointing and blame going on towards that middle layer, that they're ineffective and incapable and not the right fit. But I think often I challenge that with, well, what do you understand in respect of what's going on for that person? What do you believe they need? It's so often the case that people are assuming what's going on without actually asking the questions, and they're just very quick to make a judgment. And I don't think enough is done to actually properly spend time with that group of individuals and explore and I think encourage them to open up and actually even share what they want, what they could be challenged by, what the problems are, and enable them to realize being that vulnerable and showing that kind of element of themselves is okay. So yeah,
Lisa,
I generally
to kind of row back, so you really describe nicely the different kind of roles that a middle manager has, pointing downwards but also pointing upwards. Do you think the pressures from both sides feel the same? Pressure from above and pressure from below. Is that kind of, are those two equivalent pressures, or are they different in some ways?
I think they can be equivalent in terms of how they feel, in terms of the heaviness, like the weight, but they are different in terms of what types of pressure they're producing. But I still think there's probably a concurrent theme of having the answer. I think that's true. Like being able to solve everything or know everything. I think there is an element of that that's quite similar, but it's obviously coming from slightly different angles, isn't it? From a senior to a junior.
I think that's a really good insight. It is, because when find yourself in those positions, you think, right, I'm in charge now. I need to know the answers, and it's getting over that curve of going, actually, you don't need to know the answers. You have a team who can help you, and you're designed to support them, and you've got leaders who will help on direction. You're facilitating that between two parts of the organization. And I think that's a very different paradigm, because as people grow up, you grow from an expert position, don't you, through our education system into your first roles. And then suddenly you're going, oh, what? I'm no longer the brightest person in the room who understands what to do, and I've got to rely on other people. I think that's hard.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. I think it really challenges people's identity of themselves. And I think that's why people find it so difficult. But I think when you get comfortable with the idea that you don't know everything, and that's okay, just like you don't have to be good at everything, and that's also okay. I think it's so freeing. I know I've been in that space where I was like, I remember I had a role once, which, to be honest, was just not suited to me. But I used to say yes to everything, and I saw every challenge as an opportunity. But this particular role was a very technical role, very process-driven. It needed technical experience and expertise. I just didn't have it. And I tried to make this role work for me for about 12 months. And it just wore me out. I was exhausted. And it was only until, I think it was through my coaching, actually, that my coach said, you do know that it's okay to not be good at that. That actually you've already delivered and grown in your career like 10 plus years and demonstrated your commitment to growth. And surely now it's time to give yourself permission to just do the things you really enjoy and are really good at. Is that not okay? And I was like, oh my God, yeah. Why would I continue to push myself to do stuff I don't even like and I'm not any good at when I could do the opposite? But I had a lot of guilt associated with doing things I enjoyed because it felt too easy. And I had this like relationship with success, that success only came through doing hard things.
That's really insightful, right? Yeah, I really identify with that. I'm sure you do as well, Mike, right? You kind of challenge yourself to overcome hard stuff and stuff that's naturally hard for you. But yeah, success.
You've had a corporate role, Romesh. Have you ever been in a position like Lisa where you've found yourself out your depth and you've had to suddenly adapt your style, approach?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think in a corporate environment, you're kind of expected, especially as you move up the levels, if you like. You're expected to behave in certain ways, and in some ways, subscribe to a more kind of generic persona, whereas I think at the end of the day, we're all individuals, aren't we? We're all people. We've all got our way of doing things, and what I believe in is kind of gravitas. For one person, authority isn't necessarily the same for another person, right? So I think you can gain and command respect from people you're managing in different ways, and there are different approaches to that, and also nuances in personality which make that quite wide ranging. And in bigger organizations, that's more difficult to kind of explore. So yeah, how about you, Mike? Have you ever worked in a large organisation?
Yeah, I've worked in government and in a large defence prime. So yeah, I've had those big corporate jobs, and I've I was saying to Lisa before this, I worked in the NHS and I moved across into the NHS, and my first 6 months, I would say I didn't know what I was doing. I'd come from a job where I was the expert, and then suddenly I'm the new person who doesn't know what's going on. I don't know the organization, I don't know their terms, I don't know their acronyms, I don't know how to do what they're doing. And you do stumble through. And I learned a lot about delegation management, different styles, and sort of find out who you are as a person at that point and what management looks like. But I think you either got that inclination or you need help to find that way of being able to adapt. Otherwise, people fail. And people say everyone's a bad man. You see some amazing technical people who get promoted, and you're like, they're really struggling. And you're like, is the answer to keep them technical, or is the answer to help them manage? Either way, you've got to help them.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think that's what I don't see enough of. There's too much quick succession for people without actually first qualifying it's what they want, that it is the right move for them. It is quite lazy, I think, in organisations still, that the only way to be promoted in the traditional sense is to go up a ladder, because that's how organisations are quite typically still structured, very hierarchical. But it's not really exploring, is this what's good for the person? Is this going to really utilise their strength? Is this how they want to be challenged? Is how they want to grow? What support do we need to put in place to ensure that they succeed on the other side of that? It's just too like throw them in and see what happens. Because again, organisations I've often worked in has been, we need to see you demonstrating that you're adaptable and resilient. So off you go. And then if you fail, you're just critiqued for it, rather than exploring what happened here and what did we miss and what should we have done differently and how could we have supported that person. Because again, I think it's just that expectation of management. The test is being resilient and adaptable, and all best leaders do it in exactly the same way. And it's interesting what you said, Romesh, about that, distinctness of styles. I definitely have seen in corporate where one style was celebrated, so we all had to behave in that way, and that diversity piece wasn't identified. I see that much more in smaller organizations where it's actually we're individual people and everyone's much closer together, and your ability to be yourself and lean into your different styles and traits is able to be more nurtured and then utilized better.
No, I totally kind of that just resonates with me. I think it's easier to kind of give a variety of experience in a smaller business than a kind of large corporate structure, because in many ways you're trying to kind of fit someone into a massive machine, aren't you? But in my experience, the best businesses of all sizes, whether they're tiny or whether they're massive, ultimately focus on training and supporting their staff. So I have been in big businesses that really have invested a lot in their people, and that's made a big difference. I think.
I don't think it's rocket science. I think if you invest in people and ensure that actually that the way you invest in them is the right investment, and I do think that's got to be explored with the individuals too, and that it is clear what learning you're expecting and how you're going to support the outcomes of that to be embedded, so it's actually meaningful learning. I think you're always going to get return on your investment, and if you don't do it, then you're not. And so people are likely to not stagnate, because a lot of us are capable of self-development. That's kind of assuming that only people develop if an organisation structures and supports it. It's not true, but it's just going to be slower, and it's likely that that's where you see people seeking other opportunities elsewhere, and they start leaving organisations because they just think, I'm only going to grow if I take an opportunity somewhere else, because they don't see the benefit of staying and growing where they are.
Why are organisations lazy then, to your point, Lisa? Because it is a common trait from all different sizes, that kind of ability to grow someone into having more responsibility, and then just assuming they'll do it and they'll find their own way. Why do you think there is that laziness when you know it's there from a leadership perspective and a new starter?
I don't know. I think it's so different for different organisations, but I think what I tend to see is that it's a bit like even the notion for some people of delegating. I'd be interested to know how you felt about this, Mike, when you had your experience, when you said, you know, had to learn to delegate. I think people see it as it's going to take effort and time to do this. And because we all have a perception of time, I think, and how much we have, I think it's often dismissed as, well, I just need to get it done, so I'm just going to do it. Or we assume someone can't do something and we're better at it, and we don't even give them the chance. So I'm just going to do it myself. It's quicker, it's easier if I just get it done. So I think there's that as an element. I think there's also whether businesses have the budgets, and that you can't ignore that, especially at the moment. I feel like there's a lot of that still as a hangover from COVID. And I think with now the whole Trump behaviour in America, with his dismissal of all, you know, diversity and inclusion initiatives, that's having a knock-on effect over here in the UK and in Europe too. So then I think there's so much uncertainty that people are putting things on hold, because people-focused services, I think, often get paused first, even though it's the most, in my opinion, the most critical thing to keep going through a crisis and through any moment of uncertainty, because that means you're keeping people supported, and that's what they need during those sorts of times. So I think it's that. I also think the other thing here is, look, for some people, they want certainty from every investment they make. They want tangible results. And it's not that they don't exist with training and coaching, they do, but you're going to have to go and canvas it to find it. You're not going to be able to just run a report quickly and see the data. And I think often in some of the corporate spaces I've worked in, I can remember many of those types of conversations, having to really champion and fight for those types of people-focused initiatives with exec boards who were just so focused on bottom line return as quickly as possible that it was highly unlikely they were going to jump on initiatives that I was proposing over others.
I love what you're saying there, Lisa, so championing and supporting. And I think you've explained quite nicely why you're so focused and animated on the space of middle management. I think because of the particular challenges that middle management faces across all business sizes, actually, but also because you know, it's so important for a business to run well, to have solid, well supported, growing and developing middle management, right? So I guess the question for you here is, what's your approach as a middle management coach, having identified that this is the space you want to focus on? What's your approach to supporting middle managers who come to you and air their issues and problems? How do you try and help them?
I always focus on the self and the individual first, beyond anything else. I think if you start there and really unpick what's going on for that person and help to support them to identify the source or the trigger, even as to how that, you know, why they're feeling the way they're feeling, actually we work on the inside out. So I think when you can really do that for people and help them to really be clear about what the true issues are, because I think often we can get into a bit of a pattern of behavior and thinking, and if you like, even the way we experience issues, so that they just escalate and just become quite a blurry mess. And I think it's about picking that to get really specific about, yeah, but what is it that's specifically not working? Where did this start? What was it about? What are you noticing as your patterns? And let's address those together, all with the intention of supporting that person to be as self-sufficient as they possibly can be. Because I think when you start there and you support that person to reconnect with their confidence and their capability, that is what re-strengthens them. And then that way we can then look at, okay, now you're working from a stronger position in yourself. where do you want to go next, and how do you want to move forwards? What do you want to develop in? Are there skills that you want to gain that you don't have that would benefit you in your role? Do you have a aspiration to take on more responsibility, to become part of the exec board? And then we go to there. So then the whole point all the time is that we support that person to be as strong as they can be, because that's what I think lifts and elevates everything else. So like, my mantra is being a manager shouldn't be shit. That's what I talk about all the time, because I think too often people find management at any level, whether you're a founder, because I still classify you as a leader, but at any level, just really bloody hard. But I don't think it has to be. So it is about ensuring that person is really clear about how they can do their job as best as they can as their best selves, and then get all the enjoyment that then comes from that. Because being in those types of roles is such a privilege and can be so fulfilling and so satisfying when they're operating well for us.
Do you think there's more
the opposite otherwise?
Do you think there's more of a systemic problem here around it? Because obviously you're tackling the symptom, right, which is individuals who are in middle management roles, new management positions. Do you think there's more sort of fundamental changes that leaders and organizations can consider, with coaching being one of them? Yeah,
absolutely. So I think often I can be working with an individual in an organization, and what you're describing is what the challenge can be, where they're bringing issues to the sessions with me that are actually more to do fundamentally with the culture of an organization. And in those circumstances, if I'm only being tasked to work with the individual, that's the only space I can support.
You're working within the constraints, right?
Exactly. Now, I always encourage people to remember that at the end of the day, they have so many more options and choices available to them than perhaps they're feeling like at that time. It's a whole fact check. Like, let's get this clear about what is actually within your control to change or to influence. It's possibly more than you think. But when I work with an organization and a business, that's more where I can support with, and have done, support the MDs or the directors of those organizations to actually look at how are they structured, how are they operating, how is their leadership team operating beneath them, what are the challenges, what are the gaps, what are the opportunities. And then we look more at some of the fundamental core skills of leading people and leading people in successful environments, because that's when it's looking at, okay, how clear are you being about what you want to deliver through this business, not just this year, but the ongoing future of it. And I'm not someone who works in 10 years time sort of in timescales. I'm much more near term. Now, that's my preference, because that to me is more tangible, more real. But we will go to that space and say, you know, are you clear about what you're trying to deliver? Are you clear about what your priorities are? If you are, how clear are the people underneath you? Because if you're feeling like they're not delivering what's expected of them, I would check that first, because it's highly likely that they're not aligned to those expectations because you haven't communicated it. And I think communication in any size organization is one of the most reoccurring problems I experience. That actually the execs and their leaders, their middle managers, they feel clear, but they're just not disseminating information down through their organization in a really clear, tangible, timely fashion. And it happens
something I've seen
all
a lot.
the time. Yeah. I think communication is often the biggest problem. And in corporates, that's definitely what I see. And that's what I experienced all the time. But then you would understand that as a challenge, because you're talking about thousands of employees. In a small organization, it still happens, and there can be only 20. And it's just sometimes I think we assume, or we think we've said things, or we believe we've heard ourselves say things. But the reality is we haven't. And we don't do enough around sense checking that. And we don't do it in a more of a structured process. Every time we make a decision, are we clear? We've made it. Who needs to know? When do they need to know? Who's going to deliver it? How are they going to deliver it? Because not enough is thought about actually how are we going to share this? And it's that transparency all the time. I always think you should over communicate. I get there's always going to be things that are just not appropriate to share with everybody, but it's so important, I think, to always be as transparent as you can be, because people appreciate.
It really helps to explain context, doesn't it?
Yes,
when you make a decision at management or leadership level, if it's not immediately, in my experience, if it's not immediately obvious why you've made that decision, you don't always get the buy-in from your team. But if you explain context, well, the reason we've decided to do this is because of X, Y, and Z. That gives context. It gives an idea, and actually people can get the logic, and therefore might, be much more likely to follow the lead there. But something I wanted to ask you, Lisa, was communication. I totally agree is so important, but of course it's harder, isn't it? It's harder for a middle manager or even someone within a team who's communicating upwards to a middle manager. Communicating upwards is always hard, right? Because you're a little bit concerned, oh gosh, what does it mean? I'm challenging my manager, my boss here, and that absolutely applies at every level. So I guess my question is how best to approach that for a team, for middle management, as they challenge upwards. And secondly, the second part of this question is how can the executive level, the business leadership of any size business, encourage an honest, open, and healthy dialogue in that way? How can they make it an easier process and a more fruitful one?
Yeah. So the first part of the question was, how can individuals feed up to their managers? So have those conversations upward.
How do they deal with that? Because it's hard, right?
I mean, I smiled and smirked at this one because I've had to do this throughout my career, and there were definitely times when I really enjoyed doing this, maybe a bit too much. But I think, to me, I think of it in terms of, if you root the conversation in supporting your manager to enable you to be your best and to get the best out of you, you're going in with a really positive agenda. You're not criticizing them. There's no negativity there. You're literally saying, this is how you can support me to be as best as I possibly can be. So surely that's a win-win for everybody. The tone of that, the idea of that is all rooted in the positive. And I think that's how I've always encouraged those conversations, because you owe it to yourself to have those conversations. If you're not happy with the way things are currently working, it's your job to fix it. Because it, quite honestly, the way I think about this is, every manager is still a person and they are not perfect. That includes all of our seniors. We might get frustrated with them for not being perfect, but the fact is that they're not, and they don't always see everything. They don't always hear everything. And it is just because they're human. And sometimes that's just not possible to be that 100% on it all the time. So if you're not happy with something, yes, by all means, sit there, wallow in it, moan about it, become resentful about it. But who does that actually serve? Absolutely no one. And it definitely doesn't serve you. You're just going to end up feeling worse. And I just think, if you want to improve things for yourself, and therefore also your manager and the team and the business, you have to lean into those conversations and help your manager to help you better. So I would go in thinking of it as, the conversation is being led by, I would like to have a conversation with you about X and how I need X from you to support me to be better in my job.
Okay.
And that's how.
And how about from the side of the business leadership? What should they do to help facilitate that process?
I think when you encourage open dialogue, and you do that by being really, again, I think, clear about your agenda for doing so, that's where you'll nurture that type of environment. So, for example, if an exec is saying very clearly, I want to understand this from you because, I think it supports that individual to be honest because they know they can be and they understand why they're being asked to be honest. Because I think sometimes if you don't set that broader context and actually lay your agenda out, actually, like I always say, get the elephant out of the room and just say what your agenda is. There's no harm in doing that, because I just think we're too quick as humans to lean into the negative. And if we're talking about building trust, for some people that can be harder than others. And if you're not clear about your agenda, they'll fill it. And we usually go to the negative. So I think if you're being honest and saying, this is what I want to understand from you and this is why, and at the same time encouraging it by saying, because I appreciate you, I appreciate your honesty, I appreciate your opinion, you're creating that nice, safe environment for people to go, oh, okay, I'm going to be able to share here. I'm being valued because I'm being asked for my opinion, and I'm not going to get any retribution from doing so. I think that's quite important. I think the other strategy that execs can use is actually being vulnerable in themselves in the first place. I think if you role play, that's not the right word, is it? Role model vulnerability, people will be vulnerable back. So actually, I think I've often really appreciated when my execs have turned around and gone, I don't know what the right answer is here. I'd be really interested to know what you think. What do you think? Because that's saying, I don't know, which is it's like a very subtle element of vulnerability. I don't know. And I do think it's one of the best tools that any leader has, is to say, I don't know, actually, what do you think? Yeah, it's so simple, but it can be so effective.
I think what you're talking about is what the skills that nearly everybody in an organization should be learning. And you've picked up the fact that middle managers hold a very interesting pivot point in an organization around communication and distribution of information, and almost without that is the core role of a middle manager, to get that shared information and distribute it and understand how to do that in an effective way to maintain the organization's momentum. And I think that's interesting. The other question I'm going to turn the conversation slightly. Someone asked me the question, why do we need middle managers anyway nowadays? Because with automation, you've got much more appetite for flat hierarchies. Startups are much quicker than corporates. Is there a world where, we have a much more flat hierarchy and there's this middle management chain that is a blocker and a difficult process in some organizations is eradicated and you don't get this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it feels like a very simple fix for a complex issue. It's too easy to go.
Yeah.
It's too easy to go, oh, they're a bit of a problem, so let's just strip them out. I don't think it addresses what the true issue is, which actually, you could take them out by all means, but ultimately what you're still left with the seniors of an organization needing to drive the pool of employees that they have, and it's how they are able to interact and engage with them as effectively as possible. Now, in a small organization, that can be a little bit easier. However, I would still argue you need a conduit in the middle, because as a leader of an organization, whether you're an exec or a CEO or the founder, your role to drive the business forwards, what's required of you is quite different from the day to day.
Yeah,
I think if you're not careful, I think you end up where you're literally like, you're going to stretch yourself so thin and juggle so many things that actually you're going to stagnate anyway. I would say if it's not working for you right now in that middle management layer, you've got to lean into it and identify what's going on here. Have we got the right people? If I have got the right people, what do they need? What are they missing? And have those conversations. Yes, it does come back to communication, but be curious, because I don't believe anyone turns up to work every day going, I'm going to be shit today. I'm going to do a really crap job. That's my intention. I'm going to be an arse. No one does that. No one does that. If someone's not behaving as you need them to be, or not delivering, you've got to work out what's going on, because there'll be lots going on there.
That's a really interesting challenge, Lisa. Really interesting. I loved your answer. I thought it was really insightful because you've hit on something there, haven't you? There is a tendency to oversimplify things, isn't there? With a solution, particularly in the tech world. Hey, there's a tech solution for that, where actually I think it kind of disregards the fact that the world is a layered, complex place. And of course, tech and other tools and systems and processes can massively make a difference, but you do need ultimately to have those core skills that you've talked about, communication, team alignment, to get everything in the right place to drive the business forward. I really like that. Thanks.
No pleasure. And I think, look, I'm a big advocate for AI and tech, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for them to strip out the noise in organizations that actually distract leaders from actually just doing what I think is the core of their role, which is that people element. If you could use AI and all the tech to strip out all the day-to-day stuff that enables us to be distracted, to procrastinate, that keep us busy, if you like really busy, but actually aren't the core critical parts of what we're there to do, and use them to enable us to inform decisions, but not make them. I think there's loads of opportunity there for sure.
Yeah, we've also talked to, and I'm going to contradict my question from previously, but we've talked to lots of founders who have tried to want to exit, and they've got the opposite problem. They're often very flat hierarchy, and the founder knows everything. And it's actually the need to grow and mature a middle management layer that can communicate and take over that is critical. And that requires the time, the people investment, all of the things that you've just talked about. And I think it's a lost art in many ways, that need to be able to craft an organization that fits for what you're trying to achieve, and to recognize that there's a cohort of people who are probably day-to-day running the business, really. And it's that cohort who are the most blocked in many ways, because they're getting the strategic direction and the bottom-up problems.
Yeah. I think there's always that element in those situations of building enough trust with those individuals. If they are the right ones, they might not be. You might need to bring in some different level of expertise to fulfill that layer. But if they are there, it is about that trust piece, I think, to be able to let go and to step away, and to recognize that actually people are more capable than you think if you just let them be. So there is that element of take some risk. It can be calculated, it can be considered, to support them to take on the responsibility and see what they do with it. But you won't know unless you do that. And I've seen founder-led businesses where the founders, sold and is essentially working through their exit, but is not actually making any progress with the exit. And the layer underneath them is just frustrated beyond belief, because they just are not being supported to do their jobs. I mean, if you want to make it really black and white, I always think of it, and I've said this to leaders before who have done this to me: if you're going to pay me this much money to do this job, you better let me do it. Otherwise, this is a bloody waste of money, because I'm not able to do what you're paying me to do. So if you want to get to pounds and pence, and a lot of founders can get a bit, that makes sense to founders who own these businesses and are essentially wanting to make some cash out of them. You're literally using your funds so inefficiently if you don't actually let your employees do what you're paying them to do.
Amazing. I think that's an insight for any organizational size.
What I'm loving is hearing your passion. There's so much kind of passion that we hear, with our guests in terms of their fields of expertise, and I'm really hearing that desire in you to help people in businesses, and I think that's awesome. And of course, one of the things that you've done, and one of the things I was quite very impressed actually when I first met you, was seeing you were way ahead in terms of doing some very proactive things for your business, doing podcasts, for example, and you reached 100 podcasts, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
It was one hell of a milestone. So look, Mike and I are new to the podcast game, relatively new. We feel we're still learning, have a way to go. We're loving it though. But what tips do you have for us?
For a podcast, oh yeah. So I had a podcast which I've just concluded. We hit 100 episodes and said that's the milestone we wanted to reach. We've been going for 4 years. It's been a great run. Time to close it for now. Tips and tricks. I think you guys are doing a great job, if I'm honest. I mean, this is a very professional outfit. This is much more professional, I think, in appearance than the coaching cast was.
Wow.
We did that on Zoom, and I did all the editing, and the graphics. So that probably tells you all you need to know. But I think the core of any decent podcast is for me, and it's based on what I want to listen to as well, is authentic conversations. I love real, authentic conversations with real people that are talking about topics that I believe the audience I'm speaking to are interested in. And I think it's doing that consistently and supporting listeners for me to learn from those conversations. So I think remaining as authentic as you can be is what people really love, and that's what people buy into. And I mean, if you look at the most successful podcasts in the market, I think that is what they consist of. It is that like realness and that ability to connect with the people on the podcast. It's a great way to interact with people. That's why I love it so much, actually. It's a really fun, creative medium as well. I mean, there aren't that many rules with podcasting, is there? That's why it's fun.
Yeah.
I'm surprised by how much I've personally learned doing this. And actually, it's the personal learning is as important as a lot of the other outcomes from doing this exercise. You know, to think about middle management with yourself, to think about AI, to think about all these different things that we just, in truth, don't have time to do. And this is a really interesting way of doing that. And if this shared learning can be gained by other people, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I love that as well. I love shared learning. That's a big thing for me. I think that's why I love interacting with people so much in general, because I think I love learning from other people's stories and experiences, and I love the environments where those conversations are happening. And I think that was one of the reasons I loved always working in business, actually, because you were always with people, and every people bring whatever's they've got with them. And I just loved it. I still do. It's still what I love.
Sounds like you quite miss doing the podcast. You know, is another podcast series, in the frame going forward? What's next?
Yeah. I mean, I've got this like fanciful idea that I'm going to launch a podcast around this topic of being a manager shouldn't be shit. I haven't scoped it out enough yet, but I feel like there's something in it. And it is about that shared learning piece again of enabling people to have a space where they can come with their stories of actually when they themselves have acknowledged that they've not done a good job leading and managing people, where potentially they may have actually just been a bit shit, but they learnt from it and they have taken those learnings to, help them refine how they now lead people. And it's that combination of, let me share with you some things that went wrong and what I did differently so you can learn from that and hopefully avoid making those mistakes going forward. But it's also that space where people can be vulnerable and learn from being vulnerable. I am a massive advocate for vulnerability. I think, clearly we can only be vulnerable if we are already feeling safe and secure in ourselves and in our environments. Like, vulnerability is not a privilege for everybody. Some people sadly are not in that environment where being vulnerable is okay. But I think for those of us who can be, it can bring so much, I think, enrichment in what we're doing and greater connection with people and like more authentic, real, truthful connection with people, and especially in a work context by being vulnerable.
We talk a lot on this about resilience, how organizations need resilience. And one of the insights is resilience isn't built from being strong. Resilience is built from being open and learning. And actually being able to adapt and think. And, resilience is a really nice outcome, but how you get there is by being vulnerable and learning and accepting what you don't know and going asking for help. And you can build that kind of resilience. And that's important in these sorts of roles that you're talking about, when you will be, as a middle manager, every one of us on this call have had it. You'll be beaten up from the top and you'll be beaten up from the bottom and you'll be sat in the middle going, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Or this is shit. This is crap. Where's the exit?
That's tough, isn't it? That is a horrible position to be in. And you know, it's so important, guys. Yeah, it's so important, and
helping people navigate that, and to know that everybody has had that experience.
Yes,
and that
exactly.
everyone can get through it. And you'll have those days where you go home and you're like, that was dreadful, literally dreadful. What am I going to do next?
Yeah, exactly. Like, none of us are immune to it. Like, we may look at others and think they never have had to go through that, but it's absolute nonsense. Like, everyone has had a struggle or a challenge, or is going to have another one, because they're not, you know, it's not like they can come at any time, right? So, like, we all go through waves. Like, I could have a great day today, but then something will, you know, possibly go wrong tomorrow or next week. That's life. Like, life is like that. It's filled with challenges, problems, obstacles, stuff going wrong, unhappy times. Like, we can't be just constantly strong, capable, successful, happy all the time. It's so unrealistic. But I think we're all striving for that all the time. And it's like we're afraid of anything.
We're not machines, right?
No, quite. And we're not in control of everything. So, like, you know, that's just such an impossible goal to strive for, I think. But yeah, I think resilience, I totally agree with you. Like, I do think resilience can be worn a bit too much like a badge in big organizations, and there is a constant expectation of being resilient at all costs, as though, like, if you're not being resilient at any given time, it's a critique of you. And I don't agree with that at all. And I think COVID put a lot of people under a lot of pressure just to constantly be resilient, and well done for being resilient. I actually think resilience is about going through the tough situations, getting things wrong, making mistakes, and sitting with that, and sitting with the fact that it's gone wrong, that a mistake was made, and it being okay that that's the case. Like, it's okay to be upset, to be frustrated, to be angry in that moment. It's about how you then move through it and the progress you make on the other side. And when you get on the other side,
building recognition of that, building recognition of your current situation and emotional state, and the ability to adapt to that next time it occurs, and recognize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've seen too much in organizations where people get criticized for doing exactly that. And I'm like, is it that you think what they did was inappropriate, or is it that it made you feel so uncomfortable that you don't want to have to deal with that again? Because that's not the same thing. Like,
really interesting.
You know, your discomfort with that moment because you personally emotionally are struggling with it is about you, not about that other person. Actually, when you look at what they did and fair enough, like, they went through something hard, they reacted as they did. It was more about them, and it was about giving them the space to do that, and then allowing them to then be supported to move on from it, not to criticize them. Like, they're just being a human being. Like, yeah, I've seen that too many times. But I think often it's our discomfort with what's going on that we're like, oh, I don't have to go through that again, so they shouldn't do that next time.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's some really interesting snippets of insights for anybody who's a senior manager with multiple people, or anyone new into middle management. I think your podcast idea will be interesting, because I think there are
if anyone joins me on it.
Yeah, that's true. You've got to find those people who will be open to being vulnerable.
Exactly.
I think there are many people who, us three have been through it, right? Everyone has been through it. And it's that ability to recognize that there are a lot of people out there who are going through this experience right now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really important, I think.
I think it's a great idea for a podcast, and I really hope you do it.
Let's see where we go with it. I'll get you guys on. I know you were being honest outside of this recording about some of the times when potentially you haven't been good, but I think more of us need to step up and share that to support people who are out there. Because, as I said, in any management role, I think you can feel very lonely, because I think you become so consumed with what you're doing that you lose perspective. And I think it's recognizing you're not alone in this. Like, the challenges you're having are typical. They are very normal. They are actually what a lot of people are dealing with. You know, that's something I'm always encouraging when I work with organizations, especially when I bring leadership teams together, is recognizing you are a team of leaders. Like, you are a peer group. So you are actually there and can support one another. And if you share with each other your challenges, I bet you've probably got some of the same. So then you can work through them together, and you'll feel stronger for it. Like, you're not alone just because you are the leader of that team and are signaled as one. You are not the only one. And that was part of the podcast idea as well, that actually people recognise, here is a space where you've got people talking about challenges and leadership and techniques and skills, like learn from it and have a space where you don't feel so alone. It's the same with this, like this podcast, it's the same. It's a community that you're building for people to recognise, there are lots of us out there who are all tackling this stuff. And why don't we share it with each other? And here's a space you can listen to so you realise and acknowledge there are other people out there doing this, so you don't feel so alone.
Yeah, that's such an interesting pitch for us. I'm going to steal that from you, Lisa, and we'll quote you on
steal it, take it. Yeah, you can have that. It's my gift.
We need all the help we can get. We really do. No, I mean, look, there's real power in shared experience, isn't there? It is so powerful. It's something that resonates with all of us as people, as human beings.
Yeah. So, got to remove the shame from it. That's definitely, I think, one of the things that helped me the most in my leadership career. When I was going through that difficult time, 2014, imposter phenomenon was real. I think actually just seeking support and help, getting it, and then using that experience to feel more of myself and be more authentic and honest in myself back in my organization was really positively impactful, and being like, there's no shame in this. Like, I struggled, so I got help, and that's okay, and now I feel great.
And that's a lovely way to kind of, I suppose, round off the conversation. Don't be afraid to get help. Look out for people who can support you, like Lisa, who's got a lot of experience in this area and who really gets it. Lisa, what a fantastic guest you've been. I've really enjoyed the conversation. My takeaways are, and thank you for spotlighting this particular area, because it's so important. The importance of middle management in any size of business, startup, scale up, SME, large corporation. Middle management is really, really important to kind of keep those wheels greased, the gears turning, and helping that drive that business forwards. And I really liked your advice on communicating upwards and how senior leadership can kind of make that environment better. Mike, do you have any other takeaways?
Yeah, I'm going to build off one of the points you made, and to say that I think you've made me really think about, Lisa, the fact that everyone's been through this experience. Before this call, we started, I sort of hadn't touched on that, but actually everyone has been through this experience. Anyone who's had a career, and that there are people out there to help you, and at the points when you're most struggling, and there are people to talk to, and there are others who've been through it who you can get support from. And I think that's such an important lesson for someone who's having those bad days and weeks.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having me. I've loved talking to you both and being on this podcast. It's been great.
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. So, guys, that's it for today's episode. Thanks everyone very much for listening or watching. Hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as we have, and massive thank you to Lisa again. You've been absolutely brilliant. Strive and Thrive is a regular series of discussions for entrepreneurs and business leaders, and we have lots of interesting guests to share their insights and stories with you. Our next session will be in a couple of weeks, and we'll share more details on social media soon. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd be super grateful. Please, if you could like, follow, and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts and our YouTube channel. Big thanks finally to Michael. Thanks, Mike, and the rest of our brilliant Strive and Thrive team. See you all soon. Thanks, guys. Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.